I knew he would leave before morning, just like every other night. The way Rowan always slipped out of bed as though the sun was a signal for his escape, his clothes already on, his phone buzzing with messages only he could see. I didn't need to ask him to know. I never did, but tonight felt different. It always did when I let myself pretend things were different, when I convinced myself this time would be the night that would last, when maybe, just maybe, things could be more than what they were. Rowan was the kind of person who didn't let you see the cracks in his armor unless you looked too closely. When I first met him, I was drawn to the sharpness of his smile, the way his eyes lit up when he spoke. He had a way of making me feel like I was the only person in the room, like everything else faded when he looked at me. It was intoxicating. But it was always just that, a feeling. A high that couldn't last. That I remember the first time I saw him, sitting at a corner table in the bookstore cafe, scribbling in a leather-bound journal. He wasn't handsome in the way that made people turn their heads, but there was something about the intensity of his focus, the quiet confidence he exuded, that caught my attention. I must have stared for longer than I meant to, because when he looked up and met my gaze, I felt like I had been caught doing something wrong. But instead of turning away, he smiled, just a little, enough to make me feel like I could breathe again. That it started innocently enough. Just coffee here and there. Casual. Nothing more than two people passing time in each other's company. But somewhere along the way, things changed. I began to look forward to those moments with him more than I should have. There was a rawness in our conversations, a connection that felt deeper than anything I had ever experienced. Rowan spoke like he was unafraid of saying exactly what was on his mind, and for a while, that was all it took for me to believe that he felt the same way about me, but deep down, I knew. There were things Rowan didn't say, and there were things he couldn't say, not because he wasn't capable, but because he was unwilling to let me see the whole picture. It wasn't long before I noticed the subtle signs. The late nights when he wouldn't text back for hours. The way he avoided talking about his life outside of our time together. And then there were the things he never said. Words like, forever, or, us, or anything that implied a future together. That I should have walked away. I knew that. I knew what I was getting myself into. But Rowan had a way of making you want to stay, making you believe that whatever it was, whatever this was, it was enough. That a few stolen moments in the dead of night could somehow make everything else fade into the background. Tonight, I had hoped it would be different. Tonight, Rowan promised he would stay. Just for a while longer. He said he had work in the morning, but I didn't care. I had him here, in my bed, for the first time in what felt like forever. Maybe it was a lie, but I wasn't ready to ask him what he meant. I didn't want to know the truth tonight. Not yet. That I watched him from the corner of the room as he moved through the apartment. The light from the street lamp outside cast long shadows across the floor, and I could just make out his silhouette as he adjusted the collar of his shirt in the mirror. There was a weariness to his movements tonight, like he was tired in a way that had nothing to do with work. That I wanted to ask him about it, but I stayed quiet. Instead, I let the silence stretch between us, as comfortable as the warmth of the sheets that covered us. The world outside felt distant, muffled by the walls of this apartment, like it didn't matter in the moments when we were together. But deep down, I knew the world was waiting for him. I knew it was always going to be waiting for him. And I was just the temporary distraction. That he finished fixing his shirt, and then he turned to face me. His eyes were darker than usual, like there was something heavy on his mind, but his smile was still the same. "You sure you don't mind?" he asked, his voice soft, almost apologetic. It was a question he'd asked before, in different words, with the same meaning. It didn't matter whether I minded. It didn't matter whether I was okay with it. He was leaving, and I would be here, alone. That I didn't answer right away. Instead, I let my fingers trace the edge of the blanket, the coolness of the fabric offering me some sort of comfort. "It's fine," I said, even though it wasn't. I didn't know why I said it. Maybe because I didn't want to fight it. Maybe because, for a second, I convinced myself that everything could stay like this. But I knew better. This wasn't a fairy tale, and I wasn't the prince waiting for his kiss. Rowan took a step toward the door, but something in me shifted. I wasn't ready for him to go, not tonight, not yet. I stood up, moving toward him before I could second-guess myself. "Rowan," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "What is this? What are we doing?" He froze for a moment, then sighed. "You know what this is," he said, his eyes avoiding mine. "This is what it is." I wanted to scream, to demand more, but I didn't. I just stood there, the silence between us stretching painfully long, and I knew in that moment that I would let him leave. I would let him walk away because that's what he always did, and I always let him. But tonight, something had changed. I didn't know what it was, but something inside me had shifted, and I was tired of pretending that I didn't know what was happening. Rowan gave me one last glance, his gaze lingering for just a second longer than usual. Then he turned and walked out the door, leaving me standing in the quiet of the apartment, the sound of his footsteps fading as the door clicked shut behind him, and in that silence, I knew that I knew what he would do to me at night. But somehow, despite knowing the truth, I still let him in, and I would do it again.
The next morning dawned crisp and bright, the sunlight slipping through the blinds and casting thin golden lines across the hardwood floors. Evelyn moved quietly through the house, her mind half on breakfast and half on Jeremy. He had been unusually cheerful during breakfast, sharing stories about his friends and his college courses, but there had been something in the way he laughed at her jokes, a warmth that lingered longer than it should. Evelyn shook her head slightly, chiding herself. He was young. He was her friend's son. Nothing more. Marcus appeared at the kitchen doorway, still in a rumpled shirt from his early morning conference call. "Coffee?" he asked, his voice thick with sleep. Evelyn poured him a cup and set it in front of him, noticing the way his gaze lingered on Jeremy, who was now perched on a bar stool, absent-mindedly scrolling on his phone. Marcus's presence was steady, grounding, yet Evelyn realized she had started noticing things she never had before. The sharp lines of his jaw, the way he rubbed his eyes when tired. Jeremy, oblivious to the undercurrent swirling around him, leaned forward, animatedly describing a recent hiking trip. "And then out of nowhere this deer just appeared," he exclaimed, spreading his hands in mock panic. Evelyn laughed, genuinely amused, feeling a spark of joy she hadn't felt in weeks. Marcus glanced at her, eyebrows slightly raised, as if silently questioning her amusement. She felt a flicker of guilt, quickly smothered. The morning slipped into afternoon. Jeremy offered to help Evelyn with holiday decorations, a suggestion she accepted half-heartedly, thinking it might keep him busy, and herself occupied. They carried boxes from the attic, laughter spilling between them as tinsel and ornaments threatened to tumble to the floor. Jeremy's energy was infectious, and Evelyn found herself swept along in his enthusiasm. At one point, their hands brushed while untangling a strand of lights. Evelyn felt a jolt she immediately tried to dismiss. Jeremy's eyes met hers, a flash of something unspoken crossing his face before he quickly looked away. Later, as they arranged ornaments on the tree, Evelyn noticed how effortlessly Jeremy adapted to the home's rhythm, making subtle comments about color coordination or placement. She felt a strange admiration for his attention to detail, a small thrill at having someone notice the things she cared about. Marcus entered the room, holding a cup of coffee, and offered a quiet nod at the sight of them working together. "Looking good," he said. Jeremy smiled politely in response, but Evelyn caught a hint of mischievousness in his expression. Marcus seemed oblivious, or perhaps he chose to beat by evening. The house was alive with a different energy. The fireplace cast flickering shadows across the room, highlighting the polished ornaments and sparkling lights. Evelyn poured herself a glass of wine and Jeremy, sensing the intimate calm, accepted an offer for a soda. They settled near the tree discussing favorite books and films, a conversation that soon wandered into more personal territory. Jeremy spoke of ambitions, fears, and the little insecurities he rarely shared with anyone. Evelyn found herself sharing in return, revealing thoughts she usually kept private from Marcus. Marcus, busy with a last-minute work call, had retreated to his office. The quiet that followed left room for something unspoken between Evelyn and Jeremy. She caught herself studying his profile, the gentle curve of his jaw, the earnest intensity in his eyes when he spoke. She told herself it was harmless, that she was simply enjoying the company of a young man she had known for years. And yet, there was an undeniable tension threading through every laugh, every brush of hands, every glance held just a moment too long. Later that night, Jeremy asked if he could borrow a book from Evelyn's shelf. She led him to the living room, selecting a worn hardcover from the top row. Their fingers brushed as she handed it to him. For a heartbeat, the room seemed to shrink, the firelight dancing across both their faces. Jeremy's eyes lingered on hers, and Evelyn felt warmth creep up her neck, a mix of guilt and unexpected excitement. "Thanks, Mrs. Harper," he said softly. Evelyn smiled, trying to mask the unusual flutter in her chest. "Anytime, Jeremy. You know where to find me if you need another one." He nodded, a shadow of a smile playing at his lips, and returned to his room. Evelyn lingered by the doorway for a moment, feeling an odd emptiness once he disappeared. A strange craving for the lively energy he brought with him. The following days followed a similar rhythm, each one deepening the subtle tension between them. Jeremy and Evelyn found moments alone in the kitchen, the living room, even while hanging laundry on a particularly chilly morning. Innocent touches, fleeting glances, and shared laughter became the quiet undercurrent of their interactions. Evelyn noticed how she anticipated his presence, how a simple conversation with him could lift her spirits more than any time spent with Marcus in recent weeks. She told herself it was merely the novelty of youth, of a guest brightening the holiday season, yet a small, persistent part of her mind whispered otherwise. Marcus, though largely unaware, began to notice changes in Evelyn's behavior. She laughed more easily, seemed distracted at times, and occasionally lingered near Jeremy's room longer than necessary. He attributed it to holiday excitement and the strain of balancing work with home life, never imagining the intricate emotional current beneath the surface. One quiet evening, after dinner, Evelyn and Jeremy sat near the fireplace with hot chocolate, a gentle snow falling outside the window. The room glowed with warmth, the lights reflecting off the ornaments in soft bursts. Their conversation took a deeper turn, delving into childhood memories and personal dreams. Evelyn felt a strange intensity in his gaze, a quiet admiration she had never expected. Her pulse quickened, and for the first time, she realized that her emotions were teetering on unfamiliar ground. As the fire crackled, Evelyn excused herself to check on Marcus, who had retreated once again to his office. Returning to the living room, she found Jeremy still seated, lost in thought. She paused, feeling the weight of the moment, the delicate balance of boundaries and desires. In the dim light, their eyes met, and for a fleeting second, the unspoken tension hung in the air, electric and undeniable. Evelyn forced a small laugh, breaking the spell. "Time to get some rest," she said softly. Jeremy nodded, his expression unreadable. Yet Evelyn sensed that he, too, felt the stirrings of something unexpected. As she retreated to the kitchen to tidy up, she couldn't shake the feeling that the holiday week ahead would be far more complicated than she had anticipated. For the first time, Evelyn realized that Jeremy's presence had shifted something in her life. A quiet thrill mingled with guilt, anticipation threaded with apprehension. And as she closed the kitchen door behind her, she knew that the days to come would test the boundaries she had always taken for granted, drawing her into a delicate dance of emotion, temptation, and restraint.